Welcome to the Founder Hour podcast. Before we get into the episode, just a quick word about our sponsor, Outer. You know I've raved about Outer before, and I love my Outer sofa, outdoor dining table, and chairs. I've had them for over a year, and let me tell you, they've been through everything from rainstorms to scorching sun and still look brand new. That's because Outer makes outdoor furniture that's actually designed for the outdoors. From using incredibly durable and sustainable materials to developing innovative solutions like the Outer Shell cover, which protects my sofa and dining table against dust, debris, and dirt. No more soggy cushions or dusty tabletops. My Outer setup is always clean, dry, and ready to be enjoyed anytime I want. Head to liveouter.com/thefounderhour to see Outer's range of outdoor furniture, fire pits, and accessories. The Founder Hour listeners get an exclusive 10% off for a limited time. Terms and conditions apply. So elevate your outdoor space with Outer. That's liveouter.com/thefounderhour. Here we go. Joe, Gebbia, welcome to the show. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you, Patrick, for having me.
Excited to dive in. I always like starting from the beginning because I want to learn a little bit about Joe, the person, the human, and then we can talk about all the business stuff after that. And so I know you grew up in Georgia, and it seems like you were a kid with many interests. You had, interest in art or design and music and sports. Where do you think that came from? Like, what inspired those, various interests for you?
Yeah, I did grow up in Georgia in a suburb outside Atlanta. It was just close enough to get to the city and get the action with the Atlanta Braves and the Atlanta Hawks and the Atlanta Falcons and Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, and we weren't too far away from University of Georgia. So there was I think a lot of connections to sports early on growing up. Atlanta's a big sports town.
Yep. I read you were a ball boy for the Hawks.
I did. I got this, man, what a crazy job in high school. It was the wildest thing, actually. I was reading the newspaper, which I normally did before I went off to school in the morning. And on the second page of the sports section, there was this article about bat boys for the Braves and ball boys for the Hawks. And I read through it. I'm like, wow, I didn't even know these things existed. Wow, these are kids my age.
Yeah.
On the field, on the court. And at the very bottom of the article, it listed an address and it said, if you want to become one, write a letter about yourself and mail it here. I made the same thing. I go, huh.
Cool.
That seems pretty
What did
easy.
you write? What did you say?
I wish I had a copy of that. So I wrote a letter and I'm like, well, I have nothing to lose. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't I? I remember I mailed the letter on the last day that it was supposed to be postmarked. We were going off for spring break, and on the road trip with my family, I said, we got to stop by the post office, and I put the letter in the mail. Now, I forgot about it. A couple months go by. It's now summertime. I get a phone call, and on the caller ID, which we used to have back in the day, It said, on the landline, it said, Atlanta Hawks. I go, what is that? I pick up the phone.
Spam call.
Yeah, right.
Selling me tickets, fake tickets.
Right. I don't need your season tickets. But
Exactly.
In fact, it was the head trainer who said they got my letter and they wanted to meet me for a potential role as a ball boy for the Atlanta Hawks. So a week later, I found myself going down to Atlanta, and I met with the team down there. And before I knew it, I had a job as a ball boy.
That's awesome. Tell me an experience from that. Who was on that team? I'm trying to remember.
Oh man, this is 1997 to 1999, 2000.
Okay.
So this is Dikembe Mutombo, Steve Smith, Mookie Blaylock.
That's right.
Christian Leitner, a couple other guys that came through.
Yeah.
It was a great time in the NBA though. I mean, it was Shaq and Jordan.
Oh yeah.
And
right before that lockout season.
Yeah. Yeah. Right up till basically it was, I think it was close to Jordan's last season as a Bull.
Yeah. 98, I think, right?
98, 99.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was a fun time because, I learned that there's different levels of ball boy. You come in at the entry level and you're wiping sweat off the floor.
Yeah.
You see the
no
guy.
balls. You don't see any balls until your second year.
Yeah, it's all that the guy with the mop that runs up and down the court.
That's right.
And then you move on to the players' locker rooms and get to know the players.
Nice.
And get to run errands and set up the locker room before the game, break it down afterwards. And you're the person who hands them the Gatorade over their shoulder when they come out of the game.
So they just don't even look at you.
Oh, they'll look at you.
Okay.
You hand them the jersey and the Gatorade.
Yeah. So I think you were known as the art guy in school when you were younger. How did you get into art and design? What was it like your earliest memory of being interested in that?
I don't know. I loved to draw as a kid. Probably not unlike too many people. I just fell in love with drawing. Give me a piece of paper and a pencil, and I'd be, occupied for hours.
Were you more of like an impressionist or an expressionist? Like, were you someone that was more just like in tune with your imagination and just liked drawing based on that? Or did you like looking at things and, kind of trying to draw like objectively?
Yeah. Well, I think early on it was about drawing objectively. It was, I took classes at the Atlanta College of Art on weekends as a kid and studied, we went to the botanical gardens and drew plants. And my favorite thing was actually drawing from comic books. So that was my real.
Were you like sketching, or were you actually trying to just draw the same thing?
I would draw the same thing, but then sort of extrapolate from there and imagine, well, what would the next frame be and what would it look like?
Yeah.
Beyond that. But that was actually how I learned to draw, was from comics.
And so once you started taking classes, did you feel like that? Because I can imagine folks who might be interested in art or like are imaginative, once you start getting into like this system where it's like, well, this is how you do this and this is how you do that, and you're sort of being told how things are, it could turn people off of like, well, I don't want to be told what to do. Like, I just want to do my own thing. Did you ever feel that? Or were you like more so open to like these concepts and learning, different things about art in school?
I have a very funny memory from as far back as first grade where I got yelled at by the teacher for drawing outside the lines. And I remember thinking, even at that time, who are you to tell me where I can and can't draw?
Right.
And this would show up again a few grades later. I would draw from comics, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was big at the time. I was drawing. And my friends in my class said, oh, I love that drawing. I'll give you $1 for it. And so I used to cut out this green poster board and mount the drawings on the poster board and come in every day. And I'd be wheeling and dealing these drawings for $1.
Nice.
To classmates. And the teachers started to get phone calls from students' parents saying, why is my son or daughter asking for an extra $1 for lunch? And they traced it back to me, and the teachers asked me to stop selling drawings.
So you were, I was going to ask like if you're like an entrepreneurial kid. So it sounds like you were.
That was my first brush with this idea that you could make something and someone would pay you for it if it was good.
Yeah. What was family life like, in terms of like growing up? Did you feel like you had to also, I think growing up, maybe not having a lot of money or not having a lot, but being interested in art, it could come, it could be a little bit like conflicting of like, is this, especially around that time, I think like the 80s, 90s, maybe even early 2000s, it was like, what do I do with this? Right. Can I make a lot of money? Like, and so sometimes they're at odds with each other. Was that something that you ever felt, or did you? Yeah. I
got lucky. My parents eventually just supported whatever my interests were. They, tried to get me into violin when I was really young, like 4 and 5. And that didn't work out so well. And I think they learned from that experience and took a position where we're just going to follow his natural interests. And so I feel very lucky because I had so many friends who were very talented artists growing up. And I'd ask them, how come you're not going off to study that more, pursuing it more? I say, well, I want to, but my parents won't let me.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, I realized early on that I was very lucky to have supportive parents, and it was like a very loving middle class household in suburbs of Atlanta. And it was great because I had access to the Atlanta College of Art. And in Georgia, they have this thing called the Governor's Honors Program for high school students who excel in certain topics like science or languages or math, music, or art. And they pick the top high school students from around the state to go study on a college campus during the summer for 6 weeks. And I got into the program, and it was life-changing.
Yeah. You get this like early exposure into like college.
Exactly. It was a preview
Yeah.
This is what it's like if you go study art
Yeah.
at a collegiate level.
Yeah.
And the teacher there pulled me aside and she said, I think you need to go really look at the Rhode Island School of Design. And I go, where's Rhode Island?
And you were still in Georgia at this time. Had you left before? Like, had you like traveled
I've been
around?
to New York. Yeah. I've been to, Florida and Virginia, but not outside the country. And Rhode Island seemed somewhere up there in the Northeast, but I couldn't even probably draw it on a map. But the next summer I went to a college program there and my mind was blown. I said, oh my gosh, this is an amazing place to be a creative person, which I think ultimately is what RISD and going to art school is all about, is training your mind to be more creative.
Yeah. And so going into RISD, what did you think you would do after that? What was like your plan?
Well, the initial game plan didn't last very long. It was initially to be a painter, to go into the fine arts. And I could imagine this day where, I'd be in New York City and there'd be a gallery opening of my art. I could picture it in my mind. I'd fall asleep at night thinking about this when I was 16, 17, 18. And I get to RISD and I discover there's 17 other things that you can study there, from architecture to interior design to photography, graphic design, furniture design, and this thing called industrial design, which I had never heard of before.
Mm-hmm.
What is industrial design? Well, it turns out industrial design is defined as everything or anything made by man that's not art or architecture.
Okay.
Which is basically
a lot of things.
Everything around us,
a
lot of things. And I became fascinated that industrial design is really about solving problems in the world. It's taking something that is poorly designed and is a bad user experience and figuring out, well, how do we make this better? And constantly asking that question, how do you make this better? And I love this idea that you could channel that same creative spirit from the fine arts into designing the world around you and actually improving it at the same time.
Mm-hmm. At some point, you stumbled upon the work of Charles and Ray Eames, who are famous, one of probably the most famous industrial designers. What was that initial, thing that you came across that you became interested in their work?
It was that first year at RISD, somebody gave me a book. It's orange. It's called World Design. And somewhere in the middle of the book, I turn a page and there's this picture of this gorgeous molded plywood dining room chair that had a form and a shape I had never seen before. Mm-hmm. And I go, where did that come from? I need to know who made this. And at the bottom, it said Charles and Ray Eames. And I go, who are these brothers? I quickly found out their husband and wife.
Yep.
Raised the woman.
Yep.
And it began my journey into understanding the legacy, the ideas, the principles that they lived their creative life around. And I was consumed. I was inspired. For those who don't know, Charles and Ray Eames were legendary in the mid 20th century. So from like late 1940s all the way through the 1970s until Charles passed away in 1978 and Ray passed away in 1988. But the Eames studio, which was based out of here in Los Angeles, was considered one of the most creative places at the time. They took on all kinds of work, from architecture to textiles to filmmaking to exhibition design. They were kind of hard to think of an analogy to today, but they were the design studio.
Right. Have you had a chance? I'm assuming you've been to the Eames house in Palisades. Yeah.
Patrick, you're about to learn a lot here.
Please. Because I don't know if you noticed, I have the little book here too.
Oh yeah.
I have a deck of playing cards here, kite design ones, but
beautiful.
I'm working my way up to the furniture pieces. I'm starting with the little ones, but I'm fascinated by their work too. So,
I'm about to share something that might blow your mind. So yes, I've been to the Eames house here in the Palisades. It's considered an iconic piece of architecture from the mid 20th century. And anyone who studies design or architecture, that's it's a pilgrimage to go visit and see this piece of work that they left behind. And it's not that they left behind; it was their house. They lived there.
Yeah.
And so, over the years, I consumed everything. I had every book I remember the day I bought my first Eames chair. I sold my art history books for $100. And at a yard sale, I bought an Eames chair for $100. And to me, that was the greatest trade in my entire life.
Yeah.
I still have it. It's the Eames shell chair.
Mm-hmm.
So over the years, I thought, well, I know everything about the Eames. I even randomly sat next to their grandson on a flight one time.
Wow. And you just like started talking and found out there was a grandson?
Yes.
Wow.
Blew my mind.
Was his name Eames?
It's Eames Demetrios.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're like, there's not that many people with that name, so you must be related. Yeah.
Right. So if we want to fast forward, it's now 2010. A friend of mine, I'm living in San Francisco. A friend of mine says, you have to go to this place in a town north of San Francisco where there's a barn and it's full of sketches and prototypes from Charles and Ray Eames.
Petaluma.
And I said, you're crazy. I know everything about the Eames. There's no way that there's a barn with the sketches. Come on. That sounds too good to be true.
Yeah.
So we went up, and in Sonoma County, there's a 27-acre property that is where the daughter of Charles and Ray went after they passed away. And she custom built this house for her and her family. And she also brought all the original prototypes, sketches, exhibition designs, you name it. She put it there. And it was, I got to meet her and her daughter, Lisa, the granddaughter of Charles and Ray. And they gave me this incredible tour. My mind was blown, and developed this relationship with them where I'd bring up the Airbnb design team over the years. We'd have our offsites there, and people in Silicon Valley, if they knew about her, they'd have access to it.
Yeah. And
so it was really like off the grid. There's no website.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way to book it. You just really had to know the family. And at a certain point, they decided that they wanted to sell the property in around 2016 or so. And I thought, gosh, no, this is such a treasure. The landscape's amazing. The architecture is incredible. And
where would all that work go?
Good question.
Yeah.
Probably out of sight,
Yeah. Just locked up in a warehouse somewhere.
Potentially. I thought, I want to turn this into a place that would be a global destination. That would be a pilgrimage for people from around the world who care about creativity, who care about problem solving, who care about the lessons that Charles and Ray left behind. And so I got the property. I definitely didn't have any time to do anything with it. I was in the middle of building the business.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, one day I'll have time. And so that day's come around. I've now started what's called the Eames Institute of Infinite Curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been up and running for about 3 years now. And we are now the stewards. We've acquired the collection of Charles and Ray Eames, which is every artifact they left behind.
Wow.
So it's tens of thousands of objects and artifacts.
And I'm assuming they were just scattered everywhere?
Scattered, different warehouses, different storage units.
And are you actively pursuing that, or are you just looking to see what's available on the market?
This came from we acquired this from the source. So this is all the original everything, and we're now stewards for this. And so it's a nonprofit, and we're in the process of a renovation of this property in Petaluma. In the meantime, we have a site in Richmond, California, which is not that far away, and we're running tours there. They just opened in February. We opened up for ticket purchasing, and within a couple of minutes, we sold out for months.
Oh man, I was about to say I might be there in October. So
that's what I was going to get to. You're more than welcome to come.
Thank you.
And get a tour
That would be awesome.
from Lisa Demetrios, the granddaughter of Charles and Ray Eames.
Wow.
And if you want to learn more, you can go to eamesinstitute.org.
Love it.
Customers are rushing to your store. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. Shopify POS is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/founderhour. Once again, go to shopify.com/founderhour to take your retail business to the next level today.
So you're at RISD, and Obviously, that's where you met your co-founder of Airbnb. But you also took a class there on 3D foundations, and something happened in that class that I think like changed the trajectory of your life. It seems like. Tell me about what happened.
So foundation year, they give you these 4 classes: drawing, 2D, 3D, and then some liberal arts. And the 3D class is really just about understanding materiality and spatial concepts. And the teacher that I had was notorious on campus. Even before classes started, I'd be telling upperclassmen, they'd say, "Oh, what do you have for 3D?" And I'd say his name, Gareth Jones. And the look on these upperclassmen's faces was like, it was like a look of terror and shock. And then a look of like, "Oh, I feel so sorry for you." And I'm like, who is this guy? Like, why does everyone have this reaction when they hear his name? Why does it conjure such terror? And
now I'm curious.
Well, I get to the class. It was literally my first class of RISD. I remember the first morning, this crisp fall morning. I walked down Benefit Street to the studio. We go into this, like, it's just concrete. It's like in a parking garage almost. It's just concrete everywhere on these metal stools. You know, I'm looking around. We're all just meeting each other. Literally, it's our first class. And there's no one there until finally this man emerges from a side door wearing all black, a black turtleneck with this big brown, sort of almost afro of hair, like this big poofy hair. And he couldn't be standing more than 5'6" tall. And he stands in front of the class. We're all like waiting for him to break this awkward silence. And he goes, "I just want you all to know that half of you are going to fail my course." And we're all like gulp, like looking at each other. What? Oh my God. Is he serious? Like, what is he talking about? And he goes, "It's because you won't finish the chess set project." And we're all like, what is the chess set project? And like, we're like, everyone's sweating, we're like looking at each other. And then he goes on to explain it. And it's this project where you have to choose a 3-dimensional artist, like a sculptor, an architect, a furniture designer. You pick different pieces of their work and you have to recreate their work from a photo. So take a chair. Mm-hmm. You'd have to look at a photo of the chair and then recreate it at miniature scale, like 12-inch replica. And you'd have to pick one and you'd have to do it 8 times. And that would be your pawn. And then you'd pick another one. You do it for your rook, your bishops, your knights.
And do they have to represent what those pieces also represent on the board?
Not necessarily. It's just a format thing. Yeah. It doesn't have to look anything like a chess piece. You're just thinking of the format.
Yeah.
And the numbers. And so it's 16 total pieces that you have to make. And I'm like, I make up my mind in that moment. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to finish it. I'm not going to fail this class.
Mm-hmm.
And so at this time, I'm discovering the Eames, and also came across a guy named Garrett Rietveld, who was predecessor to the Eames in the early 1900s out of Europe. And I fall in love with his chairs, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to make chairs. I've never made a chair in my life, but somehow I'm going to do this. And I'm like, if I really am going to spend a whole semester doing chairs, I want to make them full size.
Yeah, like I want to sit on it.
Like, what? Yeah. What would the point of 12-inch chairs be? Right.
Right.
Like,
and I have to make miniature people to sit on it.
And I think this gets at my drive for function. Finding the intersection of form and function of things that are beautiful and then actually perform or solve a problem in some way.
There are so many beautifully designed things that you just don't want to use because you don't want to wear it down, or you just don't want it. They're not comfortable. Like, it could be clothing, it could be cars, It could be anything. Yeah,
that's right. And so I have this genius idea. I'm going to make 16 full-size functional chairs, and I share this with Gareth, the professor, at one of the check-ins, and I'm expecting him to be like, "Yeah, Joe, go for it. You can really do it." Super encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
Like American style. He's not American. he's Welsh. And instead he goes, "Joe," he scorns at me with his eyes. He goes, "I really don't think you can do it. Really focus on the smaller scale." And he walks away.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something, Patrick, in that moment where I'm like, all right, F you.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to tell me I can't color out the lines. You're not going to tell me I can't get this done.
Mm-hmm.
So now I get to prove you wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like also like, just keep in mind, like never made a chair in my life, never really worked with wood, barely, had used a power drill. So like the idea of making 16 full-size functional chairs was like, that was a tall order. You know what? I worked my butt off. I made connections into the furniture design department. I got advice from people. I leveraged every resource from the school that I could. For example, I ended up making these benches for the pond. So that's 8 of them. Mm-hmm. And it was inch thick plywood, and it was expensive. Mm-hmm. It was more than money than I even had to pay for the wood. It was thousands of dollars of plywood.
Wow.
And I thought, here I'm looking outside the dorms one day and realizing there's people loitering outside the entrance to the dorms. There's nowhere to sit. Maybe I can pitch the school to pay for the wood for my project to make the benches, and then they can have the benches afterwards. Because what am I going to do with these giant benches?
Right. I think I might have missed a part. Did you also have to make the miniature version for the project?
No, this is the project.
This is the project. So you're just making a real life-size version.
A life-size, fully functional. And so I pitched the school on it, and they approved it. And so they paid for thousands of dollars of plywood. They gave me access to the school's wood shops. And by the final day of the final critique, I went right after the lunch break. So strategically, so that I could surprise everybody, because all this time I'm not giving him any information. He's always asking, "How's it coming? How's it coming?" And I don't say anything. I just say, "I'm working on it. I'm working on it." So nobody in the class has any idea of what I'm actually doing. And so when everyone's out for lunch on the final day of the critique, I had some friends help me lug all these chairs down from my dorm room, which had been piling up. And I set them up in the art studio. And so when everyone came back from lunch, it was this big reveal. And my only regret is that I didn't have my camera out to take a picture of Garrett's face.
Oh, his face.
When he walked in the room, and I saw the shock as I could see him mentally counting 1, 2, 3, 16.
What the fuck? How did this happen?
And he looks at me and he goes, Patrick, Joe, you've done it. You've proved me wrong.
I have been defeated. That's so good. That's amazing. It's this entrepreneurial sort of nature in you, to go to pitch it to the school and get them to fund it. I mean, I can imagine most kids I don't want to discredit art students, but maybe they're thinking, I want to go and work in graphic design, but they don't have that thing in them. And it's funny that you ended up meeting Brian there, who also seemingly has that same kind of thing in him. And how did you guys meet initially, that first interaction, and what was the feeling? Did you feel like he was going to be someone that you would go on to obviously build a huge company with?
On the second day of RISD during orientation, we're sitting in the auditorium, and there's some upperclassmen on stage talking about the people that we're with and what is ahead for the next 4 years. And they made a comment which stood out to me. They said, look to your left, look to your right. The people in this room right now, you're going to get to know really well. These are your future partners, collaborators, boyfriends or girlfriends. These are the people that you're building a creative network for the rest of your life. And that really stuck with me. And knowing since the first .com when I was in high school that I wanted to start a company one day, it was weird. That comment turned on a radar in the back of my mind that the people that I met with, throughout the 5 years I had on campus, I was always thinking what is this a kind of person that I would want to ever collaborate with creatively? Yeah. And so I got to know Brian because he was running the hockey team on campus and I was running the basketball team. And so we met through sports.
You guys obviously become great friends and move in together after graduating. What was that time like? What were you guys were trying to go out and find jobs? What were you trying to do?
Brian and I, one summer got hired by RISD to work on corporate projects. So corporations would come to RISD and say, hey, we want to hire some of your students to come up with some creative ideas for X product or X brand. And Brian and I got assigned to the same group. And so we spent a whole summer working together. And that was the first time where, of course, we were friends before that. But I remember that summer, something clicked, where I felt like we would be in the same room together and we would riff off of each other. And in doing so, we would basically come up with ideas that were bigger than either of us could on our own. It really was and is a creative partnership. We also used to have these epic ping pong matches, like epic. Sweating profusely, we're out of breath. It's like,
taking it like way too seriously.
Yeah, probably. Just like we just got really good at ping pong with each other. And we use that as a metaphor because it's like we would hit an idea back and forth to each other.
Yeah.
And then we make it better with each hit. And so with this project we worked on, we knocked out of the park. And I remember thinking, wow, like of all the people, like I think this is the guy.
What was the dynamic that allowed for that? Like, because it's interesting, especially when it comes to startups and business, like they say, like find someone that complements you, not, and you guys are both like students and interested in design and art. And so you have that kind of through line, but then sounds like you had maybe other kind of things that complemented each other. And what were those things that you in hindsight can think about?
Well, I think Brian is an incredible communicator.
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty good. Brian's amazing.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
he's just an incredible. You watch any of his talks, like he has a gift.
There have been like maybe a handful of people in the like entrepreneurial world that I've like looked up to speakers, and he's definitely one. Like Steve Jobs, definitely one of them, and Brian's incredible at that. He just has. I mean, you as well, but like you got. I don't know. Like there's and I think that's because of the unconventional background. I think it's because like even it's. I think like and we'll talk about this too. Throughout the years, and it's not just the speaking, but it's also the leadership, and that you and Brian kind of had throughout the whole time of building Airbnb, which I've heard a lot about and seen in terms of like whatever is out there, but obviously the external communications and things like that you can kind of tell, and so having this like unconventional background, would you say that helped in Silicon Valley and in like the startup scene? Where when I say unconventional, like you didn't go to business school, you guys aren't like engineers, you guys are more like design guys or art guys. Yeah,
I know. And yeah, there's a crazy moment where we were about to graduate. Actually, he graduated a year before me, so he's about to graduate. And the night before, we got for a slice of pizza, and it's the wildest thing, Patrick. I had a premonition, which I told him over pizza. I said, Brian, I think we're going to start a company one day, and I think they're going to write a book about it. And he looked at me and laughed, and it was a feeling that I had, and I felt so strongly. I felt like I had to tell him before we went separate ways. And he was moving to the West Coast, to Los Angeles, and I was like, I need to tell him this before he packs his bags and heads out. And eventually, when he did move up to San Francisco into the apartment with me, which that was 2007.
Why did you guys move to San Francisco? Or like, why did you want to be there?
I always wanted to go there.
You just wanted to be in the scene.
This is going back to when I was 14, 15 years old, and I was behind my computer. And every day after school, first thing I do is come home and read about whatever companies launched that day in this mythical place called Silicon Valley.
You just like heard about the lore, and you just like wanted to be. Yeah,
it was so exciting. It was like, it seemed like that was where all the action was. All these roads of ideas seemed to lead back to this one spot. And again, like I couldn't even point it out on a map. I just knew it was somewhere. I thought it was San Francisco, and then I learned it was south.
Yeah. Okay, listen up. It's 2024. Are you still using your personal phone number for your startup? One of the most common founder mistakes I see is using your personal phone for business. OpenPhone has completely rethought every detail of what a business phone should look like and do in 2024. OpenPhone makes it super easy to get business phone numbers for your whole team. It works through a beautiful app on your phone or computer and integrates with CRMs like HubSpot and Salesforce.
It's the #1 business phone on G2 for customer satisfaction with over 1,700 reviews. And here's a feature that I love personally. With OpenPhone's AI-powered call transcripts and summaries, you can have a summary of your phone call with action items right when you hang up. No more note-taking or forgotten to-dos. What's more is that every employee that's sharing that phone number with you has access to it too. Total recall across your entire team. OpenPhone is already affordable at a starting price of $15 per user per month. But for a limited time, the Founder Hour listeners can get 20% off for 6 months. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. Head to openphone.com/founder to start your free trial and get 20% off. It seems like that time between the dot-com bubble and the global financial crisis, which is when Airbnb started, it almost seemed like a quiet period in Silicon Valley. Like,
oh yeah,
they were just trying to figure out like, how do we come back from this bust and what's working, what's not. And then I know in like 08, 09 is when all these like companies came out, Uber, Airbnb. And so like, it's interesting that you were like, I want to go there at that time.
Well, I mean, it was, the seed was planted during the dot-com. Of course, the seed was rattled watching the dot-com bust. And all throughout RISD, I kept track of what was going on. And I think the big turning point that I remember was when YouTube got bought by Google for $1.something billion. And that was like a head-turning moment. Like, whoa, wait a second. That's crazy.
Was that like 06?
Yeah.
Something like that?
05, 06,
yeah.
Maybe somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Facebook was getting going from 04 on. And, 2006 was when I did a road trip from Providence all the way across country to San Francisco. And it was a crazy experience. I had my entire life fit in my Jeep Cherokee.
Yeah.
Probably it was the first and probably the last time I'll ever have my life fit in a car. But an amazing sense of freedom for 5 or 6 days. You can literally go anywhere.
Yep. Yeah.
Totally
so
untethered.
You made it to San Francisco.
Made it to San Francisco and finally convinced Brian to move up after about a year of recruiting him. And
what was he doing for that? You were like trying to get him to come to live with you?
He was in LA doing some design work, living with some friends from school. And
yep.
He had obligations and eventually decided to take this courageous move to San Francisco to be my roommate.
And were you working at the time in San Francisco?
Yes and no. I had a job. I was doing design at Chronicle Books and also had 2 startups on the side.
What does that mean? Like, were you designing like sketches in books?
No, I was actually, as an industrial designer, I was designing packaging for really high-end books. So for the George Lucas Star Wars book, for the Hugh Hefner Playboy book, and what was the other one? I can't remember. But also the retail experience and the kind of fixtures or displays.
Yeah.
So it was paying the bills, but ultimately I knew I wanted to run my own thing, and I learned a lot from Chronicle. Talk about a creative culture.
Mm-hmm.
Like I really got to draw, and I'm so happy that like my one job other than the Hawks in life was with Chronicle.
So your head's in like this, I want to build something space, and then you have this industrial design background, and so maybe a lot of people would want to maybe like build like a high-end furniture company or go, I don't know, just like these like really interesting things. And not that it wasn't interesting, and I want to hear about it, but you ended up creating something called Crit Buns. Was that when you were in San Francisco?
It started before San Francisco, but I definitely brought it with
What
me.
made you want to do that? And what was it? Just for the listeners who don't know.
These are the stories before the story.
Yeah.
And by the way, like anyone who's ever reached some form of success as an entrepreneur has like a dozen stories that you've never heard of before, of things they tried and failed. And this is one of those things. It's called Crit Buns, and it was inspired back at RISD in the first semester in drawing class. We'd come in and we have to pin up our drawing homework on the wall, and then we spend 8 hours critiquing it, or it would be called a crit.
Mm-hmm.
Like people say, how'd your crit go? Oh man, my crit was so hard today. My professor just came down on me. And so the studios are hardwood floors, metal stools, wooden benches, and they're covered with dust and ink and paint. And after 8 hours, your butt not only hurt, but your pants were covered in these materials that were rubbing off. And so I remember walking back to my dorm room in Providence that afternoon thinking, there's got to be a better way. What if there was a seat cushion that could keep you comfortable and keep you clean? And I remember watching my classmates walk out of the studio with this bun print on the seat of their pants. And I thought, what if that was the shape of the cushion? And I drew a sketch in my sketchbook, and I called it crit buns, which is like 2 buns with a handle integrated into it, kind of molded on top with some curves.
And your target audience was just going to be those students.
Yes.
Yeah. Very, very small TAM.
Super niche. Doesn't get more niche than that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, first year of school, I had no idea how to make a foam seat cushion. Yeah. Fast forward through industrial design, I know how to make a seat cushion now. So I prototyped it myself and showed it to my classmates. People loved it. They thought it was hilarious. They'd say, I paid $20 for it. I asked them what colors. And I got to the stage where I didn't have the money to develop it. But here's the other thing. RISD was really good at the theoretical design. Like, you're designing, in an art studio at school. Very rarely, if not ever, did your concepts go beyond campus. And I was always curious about the beyond campus part. Like, how does a product get on the shelf of a store?
Right.
To me, that was the ultimate end game.
Mm-hmm. Had you seen anything like that happen?
Not really. Not as a student.
As a student.
Certainly alumni, of course. But as a student, your work was always constrained to the semester, and it always ended at the semester, never continued on. And so with crit buns, I submitted it to a competition on campus. It won the competition. The competition was for a gift for every graduate of my class of 2005. So it was given out to 800 people. And the school paid for it.
Wow.
I didn't make any money on it, but afterwards they gave me the metal mold of, the injection molded foam. And so the day after graduation, I decided I'm going to start a company to bring crit buns to market and figure out that black box of how do you get a product to the shelf of the store. I'm going to use this as that way to learn.
So you ended up making more than the 800?
Well, not right away. That summer I filed for the patent, which I got. I created the brand, did the package design, started the website, all out of my apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back to the school and I said, hey, that was great for the graduating class. What about this upcoming incoming class this September?
Yeah.
They love that idea.
Yeah.
So
you had like never ending flow of customers just every year. You just like
basically
new 800.
I know. So I got an order of 400 cushions and I tacked my own inventory onto that. And before I knew it, I had, I don't know, a few hundred cushions sitting in my basement in my apartment in Providence. And I'm looking at it, it's like dark, musty basement. And it just dawned on me, no one's coming to my basement to buy these. I have to go out into the world and actually sell these.
Right.
So then I figured out the whole sales process, and I would go door to door to every shop and store, not in Providence, but Boston, New York, Atlanta, anywhere I traveled. I brought a cushion with me, and I would practice my pitch anywhere. Like, because people would always ask, like, what is that? And I would say, oh, let me tell you. And I would be practicing my pitch on airplanes to a random person sitting next to me. I'd be practicing my pitch.
Grandson of Eames.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. That's funny. That's awesome. So I want to obviously cover a little bit about Airbnb and then talk about Samara, which is what your current business. Is that how you pronounce it? Samara?
Samara, yes.
I know the story of Airbnb has been widely documented, so we don't have to go through all of it. But just to kind of gloss over that initial. So there was like a conference happening, an art conference in San Francisco, and you guys had your landlord had raised your rent, and you guys wanted to figure out a way to pay for that, right? And so, you ended up creating this website and getting the people who were going to the art conference to come stay with you, and charging them. When it started feeling like there was something there, there's something happening here. What did you do in terms of making this like more of like a business? And I know early on you guys you heard a lot of no's, like you went through Y Combinator and you were just getting a lot of rejection in terms of like, this is not a good idea. And kind of going back to the experiences that you had in school and people telling you like, you can't do this, right? Did that just like spark this thing in you? Because it seems like even going back, that was the thing that made you go out and like figure out a way to build these like real life size, things. Like it was this someone telling you no, and the power of that, right? And the power that could bring. And
you figuring out a way to make it happen? Like, did you feel like it was going to be just like one of those things, Airbnb?
We did have to get very used to hearing no. And no can mean a couple of things. You can interpret it in different ways. And for us, for me, for myself, going back to the chess set or other things earlier in life, even where I had a belief and somebody disagreed with it and they said, you can't do that. I thought internally, I said, well, why not? And I mean, Airbnb is a great example of all the times we got rejected by really smart people, the people that had picked some of the internet greats, YouTube and PayPal and Facebook and others, were telling us that our idea was silly, it was weird, creepy, would never work. Good luck, work on something else. And one of the arts of entrepreneurship is being able to reframe a rejection and turn it into something that moves you forward, not backward.
But I can imagine most people will have this like self-doubt of like, well, maybe they're right. Like, these guys are smart. Who am I to think that I can do that? Like, they've probably seen this before. They've probably seen this so many times, right? What gave you the conviction that I need to do this? Something's here.
In the case of Airbnb, it was the fact that we hosted 3 guests on airbeds in our apartment, and it was a beautiful experience. We both economically, we saved our apartment that weekend. We made over, I think, $1,000. And then second, there was a social dynamic to it that was so unexpected, but so interesting. And because we had that firsthand experience, for me, and I think for Brian as well, gave us the foundation to stand on and just say, wait, they haven't seen it yet. If they're saying no, it's only because they haven't experienced what we did. And so we just need to keep going far enough for enough people to also see what we saw and also have the firsthand experience. And from that place, then they'll have a real opinion on what this is really about.
How did you go about, I mean, who were those like early champions for you? Was it like Paul Graham? And, I know there's like the famous email exchanges that I think he or you guys had with other investors that people can find online. And it's really fascinating to see that. But who were those early champions, and how did you, were they just, they just got it from the beginning? Like, were they just people like, okay, I see what you guys see. We're going to figure out a way to make this work. Like, we're going to convince whoever we need to convince, and that's how we're going to do it.
Yeah, it was hard to find those people in the early days. I remember one of the very first was a partner at a law firm called Fenwick & West in San Francisco named Sam Angus, who within about 60 seconds of Brian and I explaining the business to him, because at this point, I guess we technically weren't a business. We weren't even incorporated. We needed a law firm in order to establish ourselves to become an actual business so that we could then go raise money.
So you were trying to hire them as a law firm?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, by the way, some of the law firms laughed us out of conference rooms, literally laughed us out to the point where Brian and I would shut the laptop and leave because the individuals in the room were laughing at us because they thought our concept was so weird and silly that it was a joke to them.
Another time, you probably wish you had a camera to record there. You got to start carrying around a camera. No I recently got a camera, and I'm like, I just need to have a physical camera outside of my phone just to like document stuff because I don't want to have regrets.
Smart. It'd be good for your book one day.
Exactly.
So yeah, Sam Angus, within 60 seconds, guys, this is going to be big. And Brian and I look at each other and we're like, wait, he believes in us? Like, oh wow, like this is new.
Yeah, is there like an ulterior motive here? Like, what is he trying to say?
Sam was amazing. He stayed at our corporate counsel, like external corporate counsel for at least I think a decade after that, and he's still a friend and somebody I'll never forget. You never forget those people that believe in you.
So, do you think? So I can imagine the reason why a lot of these quote unquote experienced investors and people were saying no is because they were probably thinking, okay, long term, what's the business model here? Are the economics going to make sense? Would people even, I mean, first of all, would people even be interested in staying in strangers' homes? But assuming they were, like, how is this going to work? Do you think that there was this sense of naivete with you and Brian not having, you guys are just like fresh out of college, no real sort of experience like working in a business, seeing like the stuff in the behind the scenes that that helped with that conviction?
Perhaps. I know at a certain point our design backgrounds were considered a liability because we didn't fit the mold of a common successful Silicon Valley startup, which is a couple computer scientists, maybe an MBA,
right?
Maybe a product person that would be your founding team. And so I think a lot of those rejections, people looked at us and they made assumptions. Oh, well, they only have one technical co-founder, so how on earth could that ever be a successful internet company? And I think Paul Graham is one of the guys who saw that as an asset, and recognized that this is different. I like different.
In hindsight, how did that design experience help?
Little did I know that going to design school would be amazing preparation for entrepreneurship. Because if you think about it, design training is to look around the world, to spot a problem or an opportunity, to design something better than what it currently is. Then you have to imagine what that solution is. You sketch it, you prototype it, whether it's a digital prototype, a 3D render, or a physical model. And you actually have to will the thing into existence and make something that didn't exist before you. And that's exactly what starting a company is. You spot a problem in the world, you come up with a better way to serve a consumer, and then you have to will it into existence. You have to design it. And so I think Brian and I, having that background, was the perfect training to design a company.
It's interesting because I feel like that really could help take something from 0 to 1. But once it comes to like, this business is growing and now it's becoming an organization, and like there's like hierarchies and like, leadership comes into play and being able to manage people. A lot of maybe investors want to, and we've seen this happen time and time again, to take the Steve Jobs example, like, you're out, buddy. Like, we're bringing in like this MBA who can basically knows how to run companies and take it to the next level. But it's always fascinating when I see companies like Airbnb where it's still founder led all the way through, even after IPO. Like, now it's a public company. Now it's the public markets we got to talk to, like all this stuff. And, seemingly you have to like learn these things just as you go. But, looking back, like what were the things that you learned in terms of what makes a good leader? Because I think we learn, and when I say we, like I didn't go to business school, like my grad school, but I think those who do might learn certain things about leadership that may not translate well in the real world. Like it's just like it's like the educational, academic like view of leadership. But what did you learn about true leadership as someone that didn't have that experience and didn't really learn it in school and then had to figure it out as you went?
Self-awareness is key. And one of the fastest ways to close the gap is to get a 360 review. Which is everyone, like your people who are reporting to you, people. Yes. You have usually typically a facilitator. Maybe it's somebody in the company, or you hire somebody outside and they come in and they interview people that you work with. And they get the good, bad, and the ugly of what it's like to actually work with you. And I did this a couple years in, and I learned a lot. Were they? I don't want to say positive or negative, but were they? What was the general? It was a mix. It was a mix. Okay. Yeah, there were certainly some highlights, but a lot of things that I didn't know. And one of those things, if I think back to it, this is probably 10 years ago, was people saw me as this highly optimistic leader, and they loved working with me for that reason. Also meant that nobody ever wanted to give me bad news. Who wants to be the messenger of something that's not going well? I'm not going to risk my job. Like, yeah. And, I wasn't fully aware of this until I did this 360. And it became very obvious. And one of the things that I started to do almost immediately is ask people for the bad news. Like I had to create more of an environment where I made it comfortable for people to speak up and share things that weren't going well. sometimes I would open meetings just by saying, guys, let's start with the bad news. What's the thing that I need to hear?
Mm-hmm.
And let's talk about it now before it escalates and turns into an even bigger problem.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, it was really awkward. And people were like, what? Like, you want to hear the bad news? And I go, yep.
Yeah.
And eventually people got used to it, and I didn't have to ask for it.
It's creating this environment of like just super honest feedback, you know, in terms of like no hard feelings. Like we're all trying to get better. Like just be honest with me and I can be better for you and type of thing. And then just taking and implementing that feedback.
Yes.
And that's how you just grow over time as a leader.
That's one example. Another analogy I had at the time is when you go to 0 to 1 as a founder, I'll use a bike metaphor. You ever ridden a fixed gear bike?
No.
Fixed gear bike has one gear.
Okay.
Sometimes it has brakes. Sometimes it doesn't. It means that when the wheels are moving, the pedals are moving.
Mm-hmm.
They're fixed to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, founding a company that phase at 0 to 1 is a fixed gear bike. You're pedaling as hard as you can, as fast as you can. Not really any braking. You just go.
Yeah.
There's not adjustments. You just go. When you get past 1, as you're scaling something, you need more gears. You need more of like a 27 speed bike and brakes,
mm-hmm.
where you can adjust as a leader. You kind of ebb and flow a little bit more. It's not quite as one size fits all, one speed all the time.
Yeah.
Right. So there's I think more of a nuance and being able to ebb and flow with your teams.
Yeah. Yeah.
At different speeds.
Feeling stressed, struggling to sleep at night, or just need a little health boost? Look no further than Magnesium Breakthrough from BioOptimizers. It's the only supplement on the market that combines 7 types of magnesium in one bottle, each with unique benefits for your body. Whether you need help with muscle recovery, heart health, or energy production, Magnesium Breakthrough has you covered. Plus, it's all natural, vegan, and gluten-free. Head to biooptimizers.com/founderhour and use the code FOUNDERHOUR for 10% off your order. Don't miss out on the #1 selling magnesium supplement.
So at some point, you started like an innovation lab at Airbnb. And from what I understand, that's where Samara was born. What ultimately made you, I know Airbnb went public a few years ago. And obviously when that happens, it's a different game, different type of business. And a lot of founders you see leave because at that point, because you know, they want to kind of be part of building something again, like the early stages. What was it for you? Like you had seen this company go public, which is a huge success. What led you to want to step down from your role there and focus on building Samara, which ended up branching out as a separate company at that time?
Totally, yeah. Samara started as an R&D group inside Airbnb in 2016. And we began by thinking about new models, new platforms, new verticals that would be interesting for Airbnb to explore one day. And early on, there were a couple of things going on in California where we were based. The first is that the state was passing these laws around these things called ADUs, which is accessory dwelling unit. And it was getting all this press and this attention in 2017, 18, 19. And the state was really going deep into making it easy for people to put an ADU in their yard. ADUs are typically 400 to 800 square feet. Some people call them tiny homes.
I can imagine Airbnb had a lot to do with that. Like the existence of Airbnb, the notion of having extra space in your home to rent out. Because a lot of people rent ADUs out. I mean, you could build an ADU and have it for yourself, obviously, but like that's the main goal, right?
Yeah, well, it's a third of people typically use ADUs to rent out for long-term stays. The other third of use is for family. So that's both housing the aging parents or young kids coming home from college. And the last third is for personal use as they were to do
office or studio.
Podcast studio.
Podcast studio, exactly.
Yeah. And so the state of California is putting a lot of weight into ADU adoption. Okay. Second thing is I was in the market for one around this time, and I went out to look for a prefab option and was horribly underwhelmed by the design of what was out there.
Was it like these like old school companies that,
people that didn't get design or architecture.
Yeah.
You know,
just like a box that lands in your backyard.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, this is surely somebody at some point is going to develop something that fits this, you know, this quadrant in the 2x2 that's underserved right now. And another year went by, nothing emerged. And I thought, okay, of all the things we're working on, let's double down on this. And like, let's actually push on this, because clearly, like, there's the government tailwind behind this. You know, there's adoption in the state of California. The amount of permits for ADUs skyrocketed 20x over 5 years. That's a crazy growth rate.
Yeah. And those laws are still changing all the time. Like in terms of, you know, how many you can build and like, you know, the setback and like, you know, how much space you need, like all that kind of stuff.
It's only getting easier, less restrictive, not more restrictive.
Yeah.
Which is unusual, by the way, where you have a government pulling back regulations to enable this. But it makes sense because California needs more housing. And this is one of the fastest growing form factors. It's not going to solve housing in California, but it's certainly going to contribute. In fact, 1 in 5 permits last year in California was for an ADU. Crazy.
It is.
And it makes sense if you think about how people's relationship to their homes have changed, certainly since COVID. You've got still north of 50% of Americans spending, working from home at least 2 days a week. That's a different relationship to your home right there. Mm-hmm. Second, 25% of homes in the United States have 2 adult generations living together. These are new ways to think about our relationship to the home. And something like an ADU gives people this flex space to live life in the 21st century and to ebb and flow with, for a year I can rent it out and earn income. Oh, I just got promoted at work. Okay, I can flip it and use it for personal use now. Oh, mom and dad need a place to go. Let's put them here for the next couple of years. Oh, Johnny's coming home from college. Let's keep him in the backyard for a couple of years. And you can choose one of those things. You choose all those things. It's this flex space just to live life.
And is the idea or like the vision with Samara to have these like obviously very well designed, beautiful prefab units? But do you also help with other things too, like accessibility and like like designing it in the like where it is physically?
Oh yeah. So part of the in the research of all this, what I learned pretty early on from talking to people, which was that's an old Y Combinator piece of advice we got from Paul Graham, which is go meet your people.
Yeah.
Go talk to your customers, understand what their needs are.
Do things that don't scale and then go meet with your people.
Yeah. Basically, do things that don't scale.
Grahamisms.
Grahamisms. Make something people want.
Yeah.
And so what's the best way to find that out? Go talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
And early on, talking to prospective customers, people were fed up with trying to do the process themselves of putting a home in their backyard. Homeowners are not construction experts, nor should they be.
Mm-hmm.
And dealing with the hassle of permitting, the hassle of utilities, the hassle of construction and contractors and architects and subcontractors, it's a lot for the average busy person. And so we decided our value proposition is going to be, we're going to have the best product on the market, the most beautifully designed, the most comfortable to live in. And we're going to handle all of the heavy lifting for the customer and make it very, very simple. And in a weird way, well, not in a weird way, in an authentic way, it's the Airbnb playbook.
Yeah.
Which was, prior to Airbnb, you had upwards of 40,000 one-off vacation rental websites that were totally bespoke, and you didn't really know who you were wiring money to. You didn't really know if the last person that stayed there had a good stay or not. And if something went wrong, you're kind of on your own.
Yeah.
And what we did is, we designed a better, easier way to do it, where we facilitate the payments. You see the reputation and the reviews of people who stayed there. And if something goes wrong, you can call us. And so we designed something that was highly fragmented. We redesigned it with a better box, better package around it.
Mm-hmm.
ADUs are the same thing. It's a huge bustling market, highly fragmented. Samara is just designing a better package around it.
Right.
both in the object and the space itself, but also in the process and the procedure as well.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's so important. I feel like, I've seen ADUs physically and just like online, and a lot of them just like you can tell that they're not very nice, like aesthetically. And you're like, you just put in all this work and all this money, like, but and you guys have the 3 pillars, which is like aesthetic, simplicity, and sustainability. So you guys are leading with that. Like, you guys are leading with aesthetics and the beauty of it, because that's so important, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody just today before I came over here. He was asking me about Samara, and he said, I wish I knew about you guys, because I already started my process when you launched. And he goes, it's been 2 years and my ADU still isn't finished.
Yeah.
And I shook my head and I go, oh man.
I don't think people account for how long it takes. I mean, because there's the permitting aspect too, right? And that a lot of time, I have a friend who's a permit consultant, and so he's always dealing with these like crazy timelines.
Yeah. Well, we can install from the time somebody orders on Samara.com and configures their design. We do a couple things all at the same time. The first is we send somebody out to the site to talk with you about placement. Second is we start our ordering process and our factory process. So we own our own factory where we build and ship from. And the third is that we start the permitting process.
Yeah.
The fourth thing actually is we start the foundation in the backyard. So the time that we're actually on site, banging around, is about 3 weeks. Which is very different from, say, my friend, a 2-year construction project that the neighbors hate you, and you've been
all the NIMBYs come out,
all the change orders that you've got with the contractor, and we have a fixed price.
Yeah.
Same way you buy a computer or a phone online, any consumer product, you buy with a fixed price.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we're now able to provide people a home,
right? Because there's so many additional costs that come along.
So many gotchas,
right?
Like all these things that
like,
pop up.
I expected it to be this much, and I'm paying almost double now.
Right.
Like, yeah.
And we even have gone so far because the next hurdle that happens, again, talking to consumers, is they're like, okay, I love the design, love that you guys handle it all, but how am I going to finance it? It's not a form factor that most banks are super familiar with. So we said, we're going to solve this problem ourselves. And earlier this year, we launched Samara Financing.
Wow.
And so now, vertically integrated into the buying experience is the ability to finance a Samara home.
That's incredible. What keeps you going? Like, I could imagine so many people who have built a company like Airbnb and had a beautiful exit would just be like, you know what, I'm just going to chill. And I know you're very philanthropic, and we'll talk about that in a second, but just like focus on philanthropy, maybe go golfing and just hang out. And like, you're still a young guy, obviously. So I'm sure, you have a lot of energy in you still, you want to, but like, what is it for you? Like, what do you, is it specifically about like the industry? Is it something about you that you just like, I still keep wanting to build something? Like, what is it?
I feel like I'm 42 and I have my best years ahead of me. It's like, I've learned so much from Airbnb. I learned so much from my co-founders, Brian and Nate. I'm learning so much from Mike McNamara, my co-founder at Samara. And I just feel like, I've got so much more creativity in me that's trying to find its way out. And the idea of being on a golf course right now is like, ooh, I would lose my mind. My brain, like, I need an outlet for my brain,
Yeah.
There's just I don't know, it's just a creative force, an engine or something that's just like constantly cycling, looking for problems to solve, and if I don't have that, like I'm not very happy.
Yeah.
So,
you feel like that, like, just that is, you can't not have that in your life, so one way or another.
It's hard to imagine, at least maybe in whenever, some point in the future, I'll say something different. But for now, that's how I feel.
So outside of work, you are very involved in other sort of philanthropic initiatives and things like that. What are like, what's like one thing or one or two things that you're just super passionate about, and where did that come from? Is it stuff that you've thought about your whole life, or is it stuff that once you kind of reach a level of like success, whether it's like financial or whatever,
you start like looking at what problems exist in the world and like how you can help solve it.
Yeah. I think I've always had this idea, maybe came from my parents, of having a responsibility to give back, and can be at any scale. And certainly I think if you achieve a certain level of success, like you do have a responsibility to give back. And, there's probably two topics that come to mind. One is around housing and homelessness, and the other is around plastics.
Mm-hmm.
The housing and homelessness, I think, is, for me in San Francisco, it only got worse during my time there. I lived there for 14 years, and I loved the city. It was the birthplace of the company, and I always have a special connection to the city. But man,
yeah,
seeing the problem only get worse,
it's insane.
It was just a wild experience. And so, I feel like I vetted some organizations and was able to give towards that topic there. And now I have in Austin, where I live, with the same topic.
What made you want to move to Austin? Because that was during COVID, right?
Yeah, the smoke.
Yeah.
It was the wildfires in September, October 2020. And Northern California was totally smoky. I came to LA actually to get away from the smoke. And LA had wildfires at that exact time, if you remember.
Oh, yeah.
And it was
where I grew up in the valley is like near all the fires. It's like literally it's insane. Every year we have like a natural disaster out there. Like there was a methane gas leak one year. It's crazy. It's like every year there's something.
Jeez. It was wild, man. So I was like, can't escape the smoke in California at this point. I was like, where else can I go, at least temporarily? And everyone was talking about Austin at the time. And I thought, well, I've only been there for South by Southwest. Maybe I should go check out the city and see what it's really about.
Did you think it was going to be like a short-term thing?
I didn't know. I went for a few weeks, worked remote, and saw a different side of the city. Thought, this could be interesting. And so made the move, and it's been fun. It surprised me, actually. Last year, I'd say, was the first year where there was more going on in the city than one could attend. It's like kind of it reached that tipping point where it's like
any design conferences out there.
There's all kinds of conferences coming through Austin. It's exploding with entrepreneurs and creativity and people starting things, new establishments. Every week there's a new restaurant popping up. There's like at least 8 giant cranes on the skyline of downtown Austin building something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's now the 10th biggest city in the United States. It's continuing. Every population doubles about every 10 years in Austin. Elon moved his companies there. Facebook and Apple have mega headquarters there, and it just is like it's got this. There's a feeling in the air that I remember San Francisco had in 2006 when I moved there.
I've heard that, and I know at some point recently you became a minority owner of the Spurs.
Yes,
and you're like involved in some like work there.
Yeah,
did the Atlanta Hawks fan in you? Was that tough?
A little bit, I think. I wanted to. It was nice to get involved in a team that was close by, and
right.
And if I lived in Atlanta, I would have likely got involved in the Hawks. But it's fun to be involved in the NBA, especially with Wemby on the team now. It's a phenomenal future for the Spurs. But the other topic I'm involved in is plastics, and you can actually trace this back to a story from RISD. So first year of industrial design, they put us in the school vans and they drove us to the Rhode Island State landfill. As we enter the landfill, we're in like the bottom of it, and it's these like canyons, like we're in like the Grand Canyon of trash. It's like you look out the window and you can barely even see the top. Eventually we drive up to the top of it, you get out, and the smell was the first thing I remember. It's just like horrific smell and stench. Second was all the birds flying around. It was crazy. And as I'm like looking into this endless landscape of trash, it was like some punch in the stomach that was like, wait, I'm studying product design so that I can make things so that people can throw them out so that they can make a landfill bigger.
Oh, that's interesting. I was thinking from a standpoint of they're taking you there to figure out a solution for that. Not what but yeah, that makes sense. No, that makes sense. Like
that was my interpretation.
Because I would assume that they're not trying to dissuade you from being an industrial designer.
No.
It's just how do you design better things or design in a way that is not conducive to landfill? Like
yes,
yeah,
exactly. Like how do you just be more conscious about the things you design and put in the world? And it's not an accident that Airbnb has no stuff. It's using the things that we already have in a smarter way with the internet. And so like that was a moment, like a life moment for me of sitting there, seeing all this stuff, thinking like, that's not my legacy. I'm not going to go down in history for being known as making landfills bigger. And fast forward to the present day, I'm very concerned about the one aspect of our modern life, which is plastic, which is this thing that is unavoidable. It's very valuable and useful in certain aspects. And it also has negative implications on human health and environmental health, and is only getting worse. And I think it's now sort of creeping into public consciousness, where I think microplastics, nanoplastics, forever chemicals, PFAS, I think that there's starting to be more awareness that like the things that we're consuming don't always have good stuff in them.
It almost seems like if there was a viable alternative that could be produced at scale and used widely, I don't see why people wouldn't adopt it. But is that the case that there isn't, or is it that there is, it's just not scalable?
I post this stuff on my Instagram all the time, and I love seeking out the answer to that question, because I have to assume there's some startup out there somewhere working on something, and there's different little things that pop up. There's an algae plastics company based out of Europe that's developing something. There was a guy who made plastic out of dead leaves on the ground at one point. But I think you have to check the box of it's got to perform the same, and it's got to be relatively the same price.
Totally. Yo, I feel like this is one of those conversations where we could sit here for hours and talk, and I would love to, but I know we're both have stuff to do, and this has been just an absolute pleasure. And I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and just sharing all this like wisdom and everything you've acquired over the years. And I'm very excited to see what happens with Samara and what's next for you.
Thank you, Patrick. Great to be here. Appreciate it.
The statements made in our ad reads are for informational purposes only. The products discussed are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional before starting any new supplement, especially if you have pre-existing medical conditions or taking medication.